everyone. Welcome to the Money Maverick podcast, the show Wall Street doesn't want you to listen to. I'm Tim Turley, the host for today's episode, and with my producer and amazing human being, James Thompson, we're coming to you from the Money Maverick studio in Salt Lake City, Utah. We're actually using a different location today, which we're excited about. Hopefully a little better quality. Before we introduce our topic for today and have a really awesome discussion, I wanted to let you know how you can learn more about principles-based planning. It's the best financial education you can get in the United States of America. And we get asked about it all the time. So if you wanted to go to the website to learn more about what we do on a private level, simply go to www.uniqueadvantage.biz and you can read all about our team and how we help people. So James, we're doing another baby boomer versus, not versus, but, baby boomer and millennial discussion on current events and hot topics of the day. So I'm glad you're on here. How are you today?
I'm good.
Yeah, obviously you look like you're in the dungeon, right? For those that are looking at some video, but we could see you, your smiling face, and I think this will be fun. So how are you doing today? How's James Thompson?
Yeah, it's good. We're just learning this podcast studio thing out, and it's going to be great because we're going to have some awesome live guests here over the next few months. We're going to revamp this podcast and just find ways that we can produce more value for all of you.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And I thought it would be really good for today's episode to talk about a really interesting article that came out a couple days ago. Many of you may know, most people know who Warren Buffett is, right? They call him the Sage of Omaha. Incredible track record. It's important to follow what he does, not just because of his incredible track record of investments, but he is, on the Money Maverick podcast, we talk about the importance of saving money first before you get into investing and that kind of a thing. And he has, I don't know what it is right now, something like $147 billion in cash reserves right now, just an unbelievable amount of cash that he's sitting on waiting for, the opportunities that make sense to him. So it's important that we listen to people like him and learn from experts and people in the industry. We don't have to agree with everything that they say or do, but it would be wise to follow people that have been successful in different arenas. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but I'm actually related to Warren Buffett through marriage. So he married my second cousin, Susan Thompson. That was his first wife. And so we have a connection there, but I don't have any of his money.
I know. Well, now, yeah. If we could share in just a little bit of that would be great. Well, let's get into this as a foundation for our discussion. This article came out on Microsoft, and it was a story by a guy named Sean Fisher, who's an AI editor, and it was really great. And it's an article about the 12 things that Warren Buffett says poor people waste money on. Isn't that a fascinating topic, James? I mean, what makes people financially free and what keeps people, quote unquote, poor? And he just tells it like it is. And so what do you think about that title? 12 things that poor people waste their money on.
I can think of 100 things poor people waste their money on. But
Yeah.
It's good that we can kind of narrow it down to 12 and just let's discuss it. Let's have fun with this conversation and, see if we can come up with some resolutions too for people.
Okay, that's great. Well, let's start with the first one. I love that this is Warren Buffett's first thing on his list. Number one on his list is neglecting personal development. And I just love this. The reason why I love it is routinely we tell our clients on the planning side of things, the best investment that you can make is not some product or, a portfolio kind of a thing. The best investment you can ever make in yourself is personal development. and enhancing your skills at whatever level. It doesn't matter if you're 10 years old or 90. It's always important to learn and be open to learning and not be prideful. What are your takes? And again, we're going to have some really great perspectives on a baby boomer again, like myself. I'm at the bottom of the scale of the baby boomer. I still feel like I'm your age, but I'm obviously not. And then you're living this life of a millennial. So, what is your take on poor people neglect their personal development?
Yeah, so I'll share my personal experience. Personal development has been a big part of my life since I was a kid, mainly due to my parents. My dad was had this entrepreneurial spirit, and so I remember him listening to audio tapes, whether it was Tony Robbins, and I just grew up in that environment. And I think actually the first book I ever read when I was a kid was Think and Grow Rich: How to Win Friends and Influence People, and As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. So we're probably the millennial generation. We're like the last generation to really understand what it means to pay for your education, because during our generations when the internet came out and when we were able to get access to all this free information. So that's one of the great things for people that don't have a lot of money is nowadays you don't have to spend a lot of money to get a great personal development education, right? Unlike prior to the 90s, you probably had to buy audios and go to seminars and things like that, right? So people today have such a greater advantage than they did 20 years ago, and so really there's no excuse why anyone can't transform their life through personal development.
I agree. And like you said, I mean, personally, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on seminars and mentoring programs and that kind of a thing that have been great. But I've also learned a tremendous amount from checking out free books from the library.
Yeah, that there's actually an app that you can download. I think it's called Libby or something, but you can access audiobooks and physical books through this app for free. It's just like a library card. So many great resources out there. Even Spotify. I mean, I pay like I can't remember. It's like $15 a month for Spotify. Spotify now has free audiobooks that you can listen to. I'm listening to a book from Dr. Joe Dispenza on how to transform your brain. It's actually called Evolve Your Brain. And so there's just I mean, YouTube, right? There's all these resources we can get access to for free.
And I love it. I love that. If someone were to ask, what are some basic audiobooks or physical books that they can start out with if they want to invest in themselves, not just personal development, but when it comes to finances, I would say Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is a great beginner book. George Clayson's old classic, The Richest Man in Babylon. You mentioned As a Man Thinketh. There's some really good stuff there that someone can just start with at a basic level. Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Well, let's go on to the second one because I'm so glad Mr. Buffett has that as his first one. The second one he came up with is poor people rely on credit cards too much. And why do you think that is, James? I mean, in fact, what's really happening behind the scenes in our economy, yeah, you can see job growth statistics come out from Wall Street and Washington, D.C., but behind the scenes, credit card balances are going up significantly. People are starting to get behind on their credit card payments in terms of the monthly payments, and so they're paying higher interest when they don't pay the whole balance off within 30 days. Why do you think that's such an issue right away with quote unquote poor people?
So, like everything, this is my opinion, but it all comes down to mindset. And I could say this because this is the mindset I have had, and it's a lack of their belief of producing results, right? So people tend to borrow when there's a gap between what they have and what they don't have, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So I will rely on a credit card because I'm not confident enough to generate the money that I need to buy the thing I want to have. So it's a mindset issue.
It
What do
is a
you?
mindset issue. Well, what's fascinating is, there actually a lot of state attorney general's offices over the years have tried to shut down payday loan companies. And those payday loan companies are fascinating. And what's interesting about that is the principle is to save and, live within your means, right?
Mhm.
So what type of people are the ones that go get payday loans and advance on their check, for example? What kind of financial situation are people in that go get an advanced payday loan?
Well, first, I want to just say that this is not a judgment towards anyone that has done that. I've done it. It's embarrassing, but uh, I would say there's a lot of things: desperation, vulnerability. Those are the situations that I've been in, and I know other people are in too when they tend to go to these places. Um, it's almost like an addiction, right? They have to feel an addiction that they need to meet
Well, why do people use credit cards or get a payday advance? Why do they do that in the first place?
because they're behind.
So they're behind, and so if they get an advance on their payday loan, how much does it cost them to get an advance on their check?
It could be 50%, 100%. It's crazy.
So if somebody gets a payday loan advance or they use their credit card, are
Mhm.
they all of a sudden going to get a windfall of several $1,000s from just out of the blue and be able to get back to normal and pay that huge interest on the advance?
No.
They still have probably the same income, right? They have the same job.
Yeah. So they need to change
So
their income.
they need to change their income and change their circumstances, right? And that comes from the first principle that Warren talked about is don't neglect your development, your personal development, your financial literacy, right? So again, that's something we'll talk about a lot is how people rely on debt to give them a very short term relief, right? And it is a great sense of relief when you get that cash ahead of time, right? But then the piper comes calling, 30, 60 days later, and then you get further behind than you were before, right?
Right.
And let's jump to his third one. Uh, is he says people frequent bars and pubs too much, so it's social activities. Um, and what Warren Buffett recommends is opting for more affordable social gatherings like home get-togethers, where you can save a significant amount of money. And the social aspect in bars and pubs is really alluring for people. It's the camaraderie and relaxing from a long days at work. But uh, what happens? Again, we're not passing judgments on anyone that frequents bars and pubs, but what typically happens to people's wallet when they go to a bar and pub in a social situation?
It gets emptied.
It gets empty because it's usually not one drink, right? Again, we're not passing judgment on this. We're just talking about the economic consequences that happens a lot. When you do
Right.
usually if people are spending time with their friends and relaxing, having a good time for an hour or two, sometimes longer, are you just going to order one drink?
I mean, I don't go to pubs or bars or anything like that, but I know I have friends that do, and it's like they go to the next bar and the next bar, and I don't know, they just rack it up. Just and you're not as conscious too. Like when you're drinking so much alcohol, you're not conscious of your decisions.
Right. And I have a lot of really good friends that do go to bars and pubs, and they freely admit to me that they rack up a pretty significant bill. And there's also a social science aspect to this, right? Is you don't just drink one drink, right? Everyone orders multiple drinks, and so you order another drink too, and it just kind of piles on top of each other. And before you know it, you've got 3 to 7, drinks on your tab. Uh,
And you're tipping. Keep that in mind too. You're tipping, which gets
yeah,
expensive.
and what if your personality is a servant, right? What if you're always trying to serve people and help people out? I also have seen this myself on work trips and that kind of a thing. Is sometimes the giver, right? The giver personality of the group, they'll just say, "Drinks are on me," or "The next drink's on me," and everyone orders 5 drinks, and then the bill piles up. So again, we're not passing a judgment on that. It's a really fun activity for a lot of people. Warren Buffett was simply saying, maybe consider the economical consequences of frequenting, bars and pubs often. Let's go to the next one. And this is one where, James, I really value your input. Again, just being in the millennial generation and being much more adept at um, technology than us older folks, so to speak. But Warren Buffett says that poor people chase the latest technology. So every new gadget that comes out, it's just too tempting. And what is, we know, I think most people know what companies like Apple do and Microsoft and others. What do they do every year with their product line?
There's always a new update. There's a
Why do they do that?
feature because they got to keep profits up.
Well, what do you mean by that? So what's like, I still have an iPhone 11. It works just fine. But why did they come out with a iPhone 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and they have pros and that kind of a thing? And again, great company. We love Apple's products, right?
Yeah.
But why do they come out with a new version every year?
There are a lot of different reasons. I would say for me, the main reason is the camera. They make improvements to the camera quality, and for me, that's the main thing. I don't care about what new emojis come out, in the latest software update or anything like that. For me, it's all about the camera because I use it professionally for work. So it makes sense for me. I have a 14, but I was not rushing to get the latest camera. Like I'm gonna pay this off, use it. It's good, because here's the thing: is like in 2 years, I'll sell this and I'll get the updated version. I don't need to constantly every year get the newest update, new phone. But yeah, I think it's to fit in. There's a lot of things, so it really depends on the generation. I mean, I know with my generation, a lot of it is the camera. The camera is a big part of it, and maybe it's more storage. There's a lot of different factors that play into it. I think more so with the younger generation. My generation right now, I'm not. It's not peer pressure. I don't feel like I need to get the latest phone because my friends have it. I think the younger generation, high school, that might be a thing. It'd be interesting to actually have some perspective from their generation, like Gen Z. I think that's who it is, Gen Z.
Right. And I mean, I use technology heavily, obviously, but maybe my generation doesn't need to have the latest. And sometimes we do too. We're just as vulnerable to temptation for new gadgets and the newest technology as well. And Warren Buffett's just saying we don't have to get the newest thing just because it's the newest thing. Those are very expensive, and if what we have is is works just fine and does what we want it to, then stick with it and save some money on that. Okay, awesome. The next thing on Warren Buffett's list is overspending on clothes. So if there's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. A lot of people have heard of that book, right? A good percentage of the millionaires that were just living in regular houses, and they had Ford pickup trucks, even though they were multimillionaires. And there's been a lot of studies on millionaires and billionaires now that they just lean towards simplicity. And again, this is a generational thing, possibly. I know there's people your age, James, that are simple and they just do not spend a lot on clothes, and it's not as important to them. But a lot of people do overspend on clothes that are very flashy and expensive and that kind of a thing. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to how the person has been raised. So, for example, I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and so it was a lot of hand me downs, from my older brothers or, thrift store. So I was homeschooled up until about seventh grade. And so when I went to public school, I saw a lot of my friends, they were really caught up in how they looked. And then that's where they placed their value, right? So I would try to mimic that. And for me, the most important thing was to have like the nicest design clothes. At that time, it was like Abercrombie, American Eagle, right? Those were like, that was what was hot. Um, and since then, I've had to like kind of grow out of that mindset. And to me now, it's like I do want to look presentable and professional, because that's important. But you don't. Here's the thing: is like to buy nice clothes. I'm not talking about designer clothes like Gucci or anything like that, but you don't have to. There are ways around to buy those type of clothes, like name brand clothes, without spending a lot of money. So, for instance, I buy a lot of clothes at Costco. Like this jacket right here. This is a Nautica jacket. Guess how much this jacket was? It was like $25.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So the brands like a Costco brands, that's a good brand. And I've found some great deals at the local thrift store. I mean,
yeah.
sometimes people drop off really nice clothes at the thrift stores. I
Hmm.
mean, really nice, and they look just and nobody knows you got it at the thrift store, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or just be strategic. Go decide when you want to go shopping. Plan it around weekends where there's gonna be a big deal like Black Friday or Labor Day weekend, right? Where you're gonna get a huge discount on the clothes or you know clearance, right? Like, I mean, I got a winter pea coat on Amazon for like $30, and it looks like, and I get a lot of compliments. I mean, I don't necessarily care about that, but it is nice knowing that you can find good deals. I think what it comes down to is like it's more important to be rich than to look rich. And after experiencing what it looks like to kind of look rich in a sense, like when I was a kid, I don't want to go back to that. I want to actually be rich and feel rich. I don't feel rich when I'm spending a lot of money on clothes.
Okay, that's great. I love that. Okay, let's go to the next item on the list, which is poor people buy new cars all the time. Um, and what Buffett recommends is buying the pre-owned used cars. Now, I have to make it's not really a confession, it was just the economic reality. A few years ago, we bought a new car only because this is when the inventory of used cars was sky high because of the pandemic. And the cost of a really good used car with not a ton of miles on it was almost identical, maybe a few $100s difference than a new car. And the interest rates were right before they went up, they were down in the 2 to 3% range for a car loan. And so that's the first time I think I've ever bought maybe a new car. I think we got one time, and when our kids were younger. But what's the number one issue, principle speaking, in terms of the value of a car that you buy? What happens when you buy a car, and that what happens to the value of it as soon as you drive it off the lot?
It depreciates.
Yeah, it's one of the highest depreciating assets, and it's not really an asset, but we call it assets in the accounting world, right? It depreciates in value significantly. Some people have said it goes down as much as 25 to 35%. So that's why Warren Buffett is saying buy a pre-owned car, max it out as long as you can, keep it maintained, change your oil, right? Keep it going as long as possible. And again, except for a really weird time economically a couple of years ago, right during and after the pandemic, when there was not much difference between a new car and a used car, a good one. That was an anomaly. I hope that was an anomaly. Um, but anyways, I think that's good advice to, don't go out and buy a new car just because you qualify for it, right?
Yeah, and I think this also goes back to the previous conversation we had about clothes. Is like it's not just about buying cheap clothes or expensive clothes. It's about finding quality that is less expensive, right? That's the mindset I've chosen to adapt. Is like, look, I'm going to buy a used car. I'm going to buy a good quality car like Honda Accord. Mine's a 2014. I got mine 3 years ago, and it had 65,000 miles on it. I put a lot of miles on it over the last year or so, but this car will last me. I mean, it's just getting started. It will last me for another 5 years. I'll have it paid off in the next year or two, but it's going to be a fantastic car. So keep that in mind too. It's not always about like, oh, I just need to buy a used cheap car. Find a good quality used inexpensive car. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, because what good is it to buy a pre-owned car that's not a reliable car when you have to pay more to keep it going in repairs?
Yeah,
You might as well have bought a new car.
exactly. I used to sell cars, so I can kind of talk about this to some degree, but I would stay away from most American cars. Hyundais, anything that is pre like 90s, Hondas, Toyotas, those are excellent cars to get if you're looking for a used car.
Yeah, and then if we have more disposable income, there are some good American made cars, especially trucks.
Mhm.
Just be really careful. Do your research on potential repairs and that kind of a thing. And so, yeah, that's a good tip from Warren Buffett. The next one on the list is, this is interesting, and I fall prey to this, is unused gym memberships. So Warren Buffett, he likes, being active and having an active lifestyle, but how many of us have gym memberships and we don't go? I'm guilty of that. I have a gym membership, and sometimes I go quite a bit, and sometimes I go for a long time without going in there. And so, in fact, boy, that's an interesting podcast just on who goes to the gym and why. The big mills. The large gyms that have locations all over the country or all over a region. That's an interesting topic on why people go to the gyms. And like when I go to the gym, there's people that are extremely serious about their fitness, and you could tell. There's quite a few people that go there to be noticed. We're talking about clothes. Some people just get the most expensive workout clothes because they want people to see how awesome they are. But there's a good chunk of people that just are, again, there to work out. But so if I'm not going to use my gym membership regularly, maybe I should just do what I like doing anyways, which is hiking up in the mountains or just going on walks, whatever it is, walking the dog, walking with my wife.
Walking
But
across America.
walk across America. Yeah, we'll have to do a podcast just on your walk across America, James. Any thoughts on unused gym memberships? Do you know a lot of people in your age group that have unused gym memberships?
I would say for the most part, a lot of people in my generation are using their. I don't know what the numbers are honestly, but I would say that whenever I go to Vasa, it's always packed. But I would say from my own personal experience, and for people who maybe are new to exercising, is first develop the habit of just 30 minutes a day, getting outside, walking, doing some push-ups, and then once you have that consistent regimen, then transition to maybe getting an inexpensive gym membership. But make sure that you develop that habit first before committing to something, because
I love that.
a
Yeah,
lot of
that's a
gyms,
good.
yeah, a lot of gyms prey off of people knowing that they'll have their membership, but they won't really use it. So, but
Excellent. Go ahead. You had a thought?
I was just gonna say there's one other thing that you can do. It's not for everyone. I would say that you really want to research this, but taking ice baths is a inexpensive way to get in better shape too. This is something that I started doing beginning of this year, and just get one of those tubs and fill it up with some cold water and some ice. And do that for a couple of minutes a day, and
I, yeah, good for you. I can't bring myself to do that yet, but maybe it's a good idea. Yeah, whole nother topic. The other topic, I don't think we're going to spend a lot of time on it, but Warren Buffett says the next item is unnecessary subscription services that poor people spend too much time on. And maybe that's also, we don't have to go into a lot of detail on this, except look at anything you're subscribing to. I mean, how many $10 a monthly services do we have for apps, on our phone? Uh, are we utilizing an entire cable package or internet cable combo package, any other type of subscription for our business or personal use? Maybe the advice is to go back and analyze all the subscriptions that we're paying for, which again is part of tracking your expenses, right? Go through your expenses every month, and if there's some subscriptions on there that you ordered a long time ago and don't use anymore, when it's only $9.99 a month, what happens?
Adds up.
It adds up, and we forget about it. We don't think
Yeah.
it's a big deal because it's $10 a month or $5 a month, right? Okay. So we don't need to spend much time on that. We'll go down to the other ones on the list. And again, the next one on this list, I don't know what to talk about, James, because he says poor people have an over reliance on skincare products. And specifically, he says combining skincare products. So I don't know where he came up with that. Do you have any thoughts on people that overuse skin products?
I mean, I can't really talk on that because that's never been an issue for me. I've always had pretty good skin. I know, and I know some women tend to do that. I, I think we should move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, so it was just on his list, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we better go on to the next one before we get ourselves into trouble, maybe, right? The next one is it's a socializing thing, but he says poor people have regular nights out.
Mm,
Now this is a problem for everybody, but why do poor people? Again, this is Warren Buffett's word, poor, right? People that are not financially free and struggle financially. Why do you think poor people go eat out all the time?
I'll give you one word: FOMO, fear of missing
Interesting.
out.
Expound on fear of missing out. So
Fear
expand
of
on
missing.
that.
Again, I'm going to speak from my own personal experience, but I know when I was a social butterfly in my 20s, I would go out to eat and do things with people because I just wanted to be included. And I thought I was going to miss out on opportunities. Uh, it doesn't really appeal to me anymore. Like I don't feel this constant need to like go out every week or every night or whatever. But I think that's the case for a lot of people, a lot of poor people, because maybe they're distracted and they're not focused on something that's actually producing um, money, and so they feel like they have to make up that time by socializing and being with people. And that's just one take.
Um, we've referenced James Clear's book Atomic Habits several times on the podcast, right? We could develop healthy atomic habits, but what else can we develop?
Unhealthy.
Unhealthy atomic habits, things that, and sometimes people will get, really the psychological word is an addiction, right? We can develop an addiction to eating out. Um, I'm a foodie. I love great food. In my family, we love good food, and we talk about it a lot. You're a chef. You're an amazing chef. My wife's a gourmet caterer and baker, and we like good food, but we can get in the habit of having to eat out, whether it's FOMO or it literally becomes a psychological habit that we have to go eat out every day or every weekend, every day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we go eat out. And that could add up significantly to your expenses at the end of the month, can it?
Mm-hmm.
By the way, this is one of the reasons on the planning side why we tell people to monitor their expenses on a daily basis and especially on a monthly basis, and make a list of all the times you've eaten out and ask yourself if it's too much. It's good to eat out, right? It's good to go out and be social. It's good to have somebody else cook your food for you. I think that's important. But are we doing it too much? In fact, we're going to have a guest on the show coming up in the first part of 2024, and she's an expert at helping people that have disposable incomes but just spend almost everything they make and then some. We're going to have her on, and it's going to be a great show, an episode. The next thing that go ahead.
I was just going to add something to that. A strategy that maybe people are already aware of is, when going out to eat, like I was talking about, Poor people that do go out to eat and socialize do that without any kind of real intention for their finances. So what I mean by that is like when I go out, I make it strategic and I make sure that it's also kind of a business meeting. So or a networking meeting where I can kind of expand my business in some way. And so then I can write that off, right? That's a write off.
Yeah,
Poor
you
people
could.
are not using that.
That's a great idea. Yeah, have an intent to talk about business with somebody if it's a social meeting, and have a legitimate, honest conversation about something with your business, their business, and enjoy a meal. I love that.
Exactly.
The next thing, again, we're not putting the show. We're not putting a moral judgment on the next two. It's just was on Warren Buffett's list. The next to last one is gambling. Let's look at the definition of gambling. I'll just read from Merriam-Webster's definition, and I'll look it up here. But there's a lot of different ways that we can gamble, right? In fact, a lot of people gamble with their finances. They think they're investing, but they're actually gambling, right? But I think Warren Buffett was specifically talking about gambling in like a casino type atmosphere. So the definition of gambling, according to Merriam-Webster, is the practice or activity of betting, the practice of risking money or other stakes in a game or a bet, right? So again, there's a lot of different ways to gamble. I think he's talking about poor people use gambling as a shortcut to getting wealthy, right? I mean, when you walk through, if you go to Las Vegas or any area of the country where they have casinos, and they're all over the country, when you walk through them, James, I don't know how often you've been walking through a casino to a meeting. I did a lot of meetings in casinos, and so I've walked through dozens and dozens of them over the years. What kind of people do you think are mostly at the slot machines, for example, in terms of demographic?
Oh, poor people.
Yeah, and demographically, at least my personal opinion and my experience is that there's a lot of retired senior citizens in the
Oh,
casinos, and I don't know their financial situation. Maybe they're wealthy and they're just there to have a fun time. But just from my personal experience, it seems like there's a lot of people that are spending part of their Social Security check and
yeah.
looking for that big hit, and it's really sad. And we know gambling is a problem. There's a huge trend right now, which is really disturbing, and that is sports betting and sports gambling. It has become so common right now, almost accepted. The commercials right now, when you're watching a game, a football game or a basketball game, some kind of a sporting event, the number of betting commercials, it's very clever how they're advertising it. Again, they make it sound like it's just a game and there's no real economic consequences to sports betting, for example. What is your take on the allure of gambling and how it can suck a poor person down even further and keep them from becoming financially free?
Well, I think for one, there are two reasons that people gamble. One is boredom. They use it as a form of entertainment. And then two, I think it's probably, a, I don't know what percentage of people actually do it for this. I would say a good portion, but desperation, looking to get a return. They look at that as an investment, and so
So they're looking at they're looking at a return for just them playing a game effectively. In other words, they didn't really quote unquote earn it. And by the way, casinos. Why are casinos so rich? Why are the owners and operators of casinos so rich? What do they know about gambling?
The odds are not in the player's
The
favor.
odds are the odds are not in the player's favor. They'll have they now I don't.
It's
These are
like Hunger
just things.
Games.
Yeah, the odds are not in their favor. It's actually that's a pretty good analogy of Hunger Games. So again, I'm sure Warren Buffett, and we're not passing a judgment, a moral judgment on gambling. That's for everybody to decide individually. We're just talking from an economic principle. Uh, when you're in a poor situation, the solution shouldn't be gambling, right? Again, it should be the first principle you talked about, which is investing in yourself and learning and creating more skill sets and changing your mindset, right? And then the last one on his list, again, we don't need to go into too much as we wrap up, but it was smoking. Um, I'm always amazed at, well, again, it's like gambling; it's an addiction, right? And again, we're not passing any judgment on people that smoke. It's very calming for people. But it also is an addiction, and a lot of the government entities on the state level and federal government, they're taxing cigarettes and other smoking products heavily. And so if someone has an addiction to the habit of smoking and they raise the taxes, is that going to stop people necessarily from smoking?
And make them more broke.
It's going to make them more broke, right? So, and again, we don't need to go into that in detail. It was just a really interesting list that Warren Buffett had, and some insights from the Sage of Omaha, right? Well, as we wrap up, James, we thanks for your participation in this. It was a good discussion. We could take several of these points that uh, Buffett made, right, and turn them into episodes, right? Because there's some very fascinating things that he talked about. Do you have any Money Maverick tip of the week? You're kind of the Money Maverick guest Maverick of the week, so to speak. And based on this discussion we had on what kind of habits keep poor people poor and doesn't elevate them, what are some tips as a millennial, specifically for your age group and anybody else, that someone can do to uh, not engage in these kind of destructive habits that keep you down?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot as I've been studying a lot about the brain and the mind and, habits. And I think what I really want to come across by telling the audience here is getting uncomfortable with being broke. Because that's the problem with most people. People are in this state of not having money and they're comfortable being there. It sounds maybe counterintuitive, it sounds, I don't know what the word is, but does that make sense? As far as, people are in this habit of spending, 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 yeah, really comfortable with spending. That's it.
Well, also, kind of my tip of the week is also some people. I read a book one time. I wish I could remember the name of the book. Some of you can email us and let us know what the name of the book is. But the author said something really fascinating in the prologue or the introduction to her book, and it basically said the biggest fear that people have financially is being successful or
Mm,
making too much money. So sometimes we get afraid of being successful. Isn't that interesting that that might be a fear of someone, is to be successful? So I think what that is saying with allied with what you just said is when we have habits that keep us poor, for lack of a better word, we become very comfortable with being poor and having those habits, and they become destructive habits and addictions and a way of living. And it's too uncomfortable to get away from those habits and to be successful. So we kind of stay in that rut, right? So you're saying, what I love that tip that you gave is you have to become very uncomfortable with those habits that keep us poor.
yeah, and one other thing along those lines is every night before you go to bed, that is when your subconscious is the most vulnerable to receiving messages. And so visualize yourself every night being that person. It's all about becoming. because you can do, and if it's not in alignment with who you are, you're not going to really experience any kind of transformation. So that's what I've been working on lately is every night, just framing the story that I want to create, the person I want to become, so that way when abundance does come into my life, I am capable of managing that wealth in a responsible way.
Yeah, I love that. And as a parting tip for myself, I'll, again, going along with what you just said, which was great, financial freedom is not a Wall Street strategy or a product or a fancy new investment, a new kind of a hot equity stock or something. Financial freedom is becoming. It's a state of mind. It's a state of being. You become financially free through a series of processes and understanding principles and having those principles guide your decisions. It's not I'm going to do this one strategy and I'll be rich. It doesn't work that way. It's a slow, methodical way of practicing good behaviors and developing habits so to where you become. So I'm glad that you said that.
And that's one of the reasons why people that win the lottery don't remain rich for long, because their character is not up to par with the person that should have that money.
I love that. That's a good spot to end on. Wanted to thank our listeners for tuning in to this Money Maverick episode, going over Warren Buffett's list. And James Thompson, thank you so much for giving your input. It's always so valuable. And thanks for all that you do for the podcast and for people out there. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Money Maverick.